chapter 619 to 621. Go ahead, but can the rest of you be slightly quicker? I don't have time all day, as I am in a bit of a hurry. In the face of Kuroto's carefree remark, surprise, anger, panic, and several other emotions took root in the hearts of the leftover 4 uchiha jonin. The scene just now was a little too weird for them to understand in just a single glance, especially because neither of them expected Kuroto to use such an approach to deal with the combined fire tornado ninjutsu. Although both fireball jutsu and whirling tornado are individually not that high-ranked ninjutsu, however, the ones using them were not ordinary shinobi, both of them were jonin, and that too, jonin of the Uchiha clan. Their cooperation, tacit understanding, and coordination were perfect. As a result, the fireball jutsu and whirling tornado perfectly complemented each other and resulted in a very dangerous fire tornado that surpassed A-rank ninjutsu. According to the common sense of the shinobi, world dealing with such a powerful ninjutsu is not so easy, and anyone facing such a ninjutsu would either choose to completely escape its range or choose to use a ninjutsu of their own to defend against it. In case of Hyuga clansmen, they can also choose to use Revolving Heaven, which is nearly perfect defense, which everyone expected Kuroto to do, but no, he didn't do what everyone expected. Instead of escaping the range of ninjutsu or defending against it, he charged straight into the fire tornado. This action was practically suicide, and it left everyone taken aback. Specifically, the 2 Uchiha Jonin were caught off guard, and Kuroto was able to knock out both of them. After all, charging through the fire tornado isn't as simple as it may seem. The moment someone comes into contact with such a high temperature, their entire body will become charred, leading to instant death. Yet, nothing happened to Kuroto, which further confused everyone. Seeing the vigilant expression on the faces of the 4 Uchiha, Kuroto chuckled lightly. Obviously, what he did isn't that difficult for him, and it's just an alternative method of using Revolving Heaven. When Hyuga clansmen use Revolving Heaven, they release chakra from all their tenketsu and simultaneously rotate their body to apply the rotation force into the released chakra to make a spiraling chakra barrier and defend against the attacks. Of course, rotation is not necessary to use Revolving Heaven, and the only reason it is used is that the chakra strength of most of the Hyuga clansmen is not strong enough. To compensate for that lack of chakra strength, the rotation force is added to enhance the defense. But let's say if someone's chakra strength is more than strong enough, then what would happen? If the chakra strength is strong enough, then there would be no need to add rotation force. The lightning barrier created by the lightning chakra mode of Raikage would be one such example of this approach. Although the 2 jutsu are completely different and have no linkage with each other, Raikage's lightning barrier can still be taken as a comparison. The approach Kuroto used just now is quite similar. His chakra strength is already more than strong enough, and because of having experience of using the Tenseigan chakra mode, Kuroto managed to create a chakra barrier cum cloak around him that protected him against the high temperature of the fire tornado. This type of chakra cloak is something only the Hyuga clansmen can use because of their innate ability to release chakra from all their tenketsu. Kuroto calls this technique of using chakra to coat his entire body in order to create a barrier as the Byakugan chakra cloak. Byakugan chakra cloak is a simple and low-level application of Tenseigan chakra mode, and since this is the first time anyone has ever seen such a jutsu, so everyone was surprised, and Kuroto was able to take down 2 Uchiha Jonin by the element of surprise. Of course, Byakugan chakra cloak has heavy chakra consumption, but for Kuroto, who can even use Tenseigan chakra mode, such chakra consumption is not that big of a deal, as it is nothing more than just a drop of water in a completely filled bucket. Normally, the Uchiha shinobi wouldn't have been surprised enough to be left completely off guard, but Kuroto's perfect timing and extreme speed worked in conjunction with the flaming tornado that obscures the vision of the 2 Uchiha Jonin. So their Sharingan failed to capture his movements, and that is how Kuroto was able to defeat them instantly. What to do? At this rate, all of us Shut up. Are you afraid now? Think about it. He is just one person. We are still four, and we won't lose. Yeah. Pay attention to his techniques. This guy is just slightly faster and has a better defense. So long as we breach those two advantages of his, he will be done for. Humph. No matter how fast he is, he couldn't be faster than the inside of our Sharingan. While speaking such words, the four Uchiha Jonin rekindled their fighting spirit and planned to take down Kuroto. Although they were extremely surprised that their initial number was reduced to the current half in shock and surprise, the honor and reputation of the Uchiha clan did not allow them to retreat. While such a thought was going on in the minds of the four Jonin, suddenly Kuroto's chilling voice was heard. Never get distracted in the middle of a battle? Didn't the Uchiha clan teach you people even such a basic point? Whoosh. As the last word was heard, Kuroto had already disappeared from his position with the use of a body flicker. The expression on the faces of the four Uchiha Jonin became tense. The three black tomoe in each of their Sharingan were spinning rapidly, searching for Kuroto's figure. At this moment, one of the Uchiha Jonin sensed slight changes in the airflow behind him. He immediately understood that Hyuga Kuroto has targeted him, so he immediately turned around to make a comeback. But the moment he did so, he found that Kuroto's figure was only a few steps away from pouncing on him. Regardless, with the sword in his hand, the Uchiha Jonin grinned. "You are not gonna get away from this one." But before he could do anything, his brows tightened in a frown. This particular Jonin noticed that Hyuga Kuroto's left hand that he was using to initiate the attack seemed to be weaving hand signs. And because half of Kuroto's hand was covered by the long sleeve of his kimono, it obscured the Uchiha Jonin's direct vision. As such, he couldn't figure out the exact hand signs that Kuroto was weaving. And what's more surprising is that he can weave hand signs from just one hand. As he thought so, he tried to get a better look at Kuroto's left hand so as to identify the hand sign pattern to guess the ninjutsu that Kuroto plans to use. This choice of his was his biggest mistake, because as his attention was more focused on Kuroto's hand compared to Kuroto, Kuroto smirked wickedly and suddenly accelerated his movement. And without giving any opportunity for the other party to react, he used both of his hands to carry out a series of hard strikes on the Uchiha Jonin. Bang, 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 bang! Because of the momentary distraction, when Kuroto attacked the Uchiha Jonin was only able to parry 4 to 5 hits. But as Kuroto's speed and attack power increased with each strike, he was unable to keep up, and after taking a few hits, he puked out blood from his mouth and fainted with an unwilling expression on his face. As the fifth Uchiha fainted on the ground, Kuroto kicked him lightly on the ground and threw him to the same position where 3 other Uchiha were placed before, creating a pile of fainted Uchiha Jonin. After dealing with the 5th guy, Kuroto turned around and looked at the remaining 3 Uchiha with a provocative expression. Damn it! This guy seems to know our fighting habits too well, and he also knows how Sharingan actually works. The last burst of speed that he used, it was nearly as fast as Shisui if I am not wrong. And why the heck is he using Steel Fist Taijutsu? Aren't Hyuga supposed to only rely on their gentle fist? Kuroto didn't care about their questions and walked step by step toward the remaining 3 Uchiha. Looking at the approaching Kuroto, the 3 Jonin backed away instinctively. At this time, one of the Uchiha questioned Kuroto, "How do you understand Sharingan to this degree?" Because of their Sharingan, Uchiha clansmen are accustomed to perceiving every moment of their enemies. This habit of theirs has been engraved into their instincts, and Kuroto just took advantage of this instinctual habit of Uchiha clansmen. But to take advantage of that instinctual ability, one has to understand the Uchiha and their Sharingan, which Kuroto did. Who knows? Of course he wouldn't give an explanation to them. Not only is he accustomed to fighting Uchiha with Mangekyu Sharingan, but Kuroto himself also has experience of using Sharingan, Mangekyu Sharingan, and Eternal Mangekyu Sharingan. So, He understands Sharingan better than the Uchiha clansmen standing in front of him. Of course, he wouldn't bother to boast it among the onlookers. As Neji saw Kuroto defeat Uchiha Jonin one after another, he was surprised, and with stars shining in his eyes, he asked Hizashi, "Otu-sama, what kind of jutsu is Sensei using? How is it so powerful? And what kind of fighting style is he using? It looks so different from what you have taught me." Hizashi's attention was still on Kuroto and the three Uchiha, but he was no longer that worried about Kuroto after witnessing the fight up to now. After hearing Neji's question, Hizashi pondered and explained. "The chakra cloak surrounding Kuroto-kun, I'm not sure how that is working, but as for his fighting style, he is not using just Gentle Fist. His fighting style seems to be a mix of Gentle Fist, Steel Fist, Leaf-style swordsmanship, Uchiha Taijutsu and Kenjutsu, and several other fighting styles. One thing to note is that all his movements are simple and practical. At the same time, they are also extremely delicate yet fierce, which is incredible in a sense, because he is perfectly syncing all those fighting styles." Neji was confused. "What does that mean?" Hizashi said with a sigh. "It means that your sensei has broken the shackles of Gentle Fist." Seeing the course of the battle, Hizashi also put away all his worries about Kuroto and paid attention to Kuroto's fighting style, which is a combination of all the fighting styles he has ever seen out there. Whenever Hyuga shinobis fight, they would subconsciously take the fighting stance of the Gentle Fist that they have practiced for years and use the very same Gentle Fist taijutsu routine to deal with all their enemies. This method generally works in the favor of Hyuga clansmen because of the perfection of Gentle Fist taijutsu that the Hyuga clan has achieved over the course of several centuries. But precisely because of this so-called perfection of the Gentle Fist taijutsu, the Hyuga clan has made Gentle Fist taijutsu their only fighting style. Although it works most of the time, however, when the upper limit of the enemy's strength increases beyond what Gentle Fist taijutsu can handle, the Hyuga clan becomes helpless. Before this, Hizashi was always confused and was unable to figure it out. The prestige of the Uchiha clan is growing day by day. However, the prestige of the Hyuga clan is still the same as before, and in fact, it is declining year by year. Hizashi can't see a way to lead the clan forward, so all he could do was helplessly spin in circles that were drawn by the ancestors of the Hyuga clan, with no way out. Because of his upbringing, even he never questioned the traditions of the Hyuga clan and accepted things as it is. And even if he focused his attention on something, it was on the Byakugan. Hizashi always wondered if Byakugan could also evolve just like Sharingan. Perhaps the Hyuga clan might have also been like the Uchiha clan. And this thought of his made him ignore one very important thing. However, today, after watching Kuroto's battle against the Uchiha Jonins, he faintly understood it. What's limiting the Hyuga clan is not the Byakugan, but the Hyuga clan's method of using the Byakugan. Hyuga clan has limited itself to using Byakugan in conjunction with Gentle Fist taijutsu. The Uchiha clan has done no such thing. Each of their shinobi explores his own path, and that's probably the reason why the Uchiha clan is developing, while the Hyuga clan has stagnated. The Hyuga clan has caged itself and its growth with its perfection. As you know, if someone is given everything perfectly from birth, then the spirit of exploring just vanishes, and that is how the Hyuga clan has started to decline. Sigh. The answer was always in front of me, and yet I could not see it clearly up until now, sighed Hizashi, as he looked at Kuroto with a complicated expression. On the battlefield. Smash! With a low horizontal kick, Kuroto knocked out the 7th Uchiha Jonin on the ground, who flew into the air and then soon collapsed on the ground and fainted. With the 7th Uchiha knocked out, Kuroto threw him on the pile of unconscious Uchihas that were gathered a little far away and muttered, "That takes care of the 7th guy. Now then, then looked in the direction of the last uchiha, who has crouched not too far away and bleeding from the corner of his mouth. Impossible! This is impossible! This can't happen! Kuroto turned around, and while slowly walking towards him, he asked curiously, "What's impossible?" The last uchiha looked at Kuroto with a horrified expression, and as he noticed Kuroto walking towards him, he stumbled backward in an attempt to retreat and shouted, "Saint, stay away from me!" No way, he couldn't help it. He witnessed everything with his very own eyes. Right before his very eyes, Kuroto used some sort of strange technique to deal with the remaining Uchiha clansmen. He had never seen such a strange movement technique, but he could feel that it is a very high-end technique. Kuroto chuckled lightly, and while continuing to walk forward, he asked with a playful grin, "What did you just say? I didn't hear it clearly. Care to repeat it? Are you asking me to spare you? Of course I can let you go if you give up. And repent." Feeling the mockery in Kuroto's tone, the last Uchiha was angered. He stood up and shouted, "Never! I am from the proud and noble Uchiha clan. No matter what, I will never give up." As soon as his words landed, the last Uchiha felt a sharp pain on the back of his neck, and the very next moment his eyelids started to feel heavy. Poof! At the same time, the Kuroto standing before him exploded into a cloud of white smoke and disappeared. Understanding that the Hyuga Kuroto standing before him was nothing more than a shadow clone, the last Uchiha was taken aback, and upon realizing that the other party dealt with him so easily, he couldn't but curse. "Damn you! When did you weave hand signs for the shadow clone jutsu?" But this doubt of his was never to be answered, as he soon fell unconscious and collapsed on the ground, with an unwilling expression. After dealing with the last Uchiha, Kuroto bent over, picked him up by his collar, and threw him over the pile of unconscious Uchihas. Looking at the pile of unconscious Uchiha Jonin, the Hyuga clansmen on the streets were shocked and opened their mouths with an incredulous expression, as if this whole scene before their eyes was nothing but a dream. The fierce battle that everyone had expected and was prepared for did not happen. It was just a unilateral slaughter by Kuroto using physical combat and clever tactics. Yue looked at Kuroto with a sluggish expression. Unknowingly, Kuroto-kun has already become so strong. Back when we were children, he couldn't even defeat me. No matter what, Yue was very happy that Kuroto was safe. Different from Yui, Neji looked at Kuroto with admiration and thought to himself with rekindled hope. Sensei is really the strongest in the entire Hyuga clan. He defeated so many Jonins of the Uchiha clan so easily. Sensei told me that I shouldn't worry about whether Uchiha clan is superior or not until I reach his level, so I shouldn't worry about it and only focus on training myself. Besides, Sensei could defeat so many of them alone. This means that the Uchiha clan is not invincible. Just wait, Sasuke. I will prove that the Hyuga clan is not inferior to the Uchiha clan. At the same time, Hiyashi stared at Kuroto deeply. The strength of Kuroto has far exceeded his expectations, and from what he could see, Kuroto hasn't even shown all his strength here. Others may not have noticed it or have forgotten to pay attention to that point, but Hiyashi clearly noticed that during the entire battle against the 8 Uchiha Jonin, Kuroto didn't even activate his Byakugan. You can deal with 8 Jonins without even using the Byakugan or Gentle Fist. Hyuga Kuroto, sometimes you really scare me. With a sigh, Hiyashi also began to recall the advice that Kuroto gave a few years ago. While everyone was relieved, suddenly, the first Uchiha who was kicked atop the roof of a house by Kuroto shook his head and stood up with a dizzy expression. Some of the Hyuga clansmen immediately noticed him and pointed at him. Kuroto, who was standing in the crowd, turned his head and glanced at him with a surprised expression. He woke up this early? This is surprising. In the beginning, when Kuroto kicked him atop the roof of a house, Kuroto wasn't least merciful. It stands to reason that the other party should have remained unconscious for at least 1-2 hours. But unexpectedly, he regained consciousness so quickly. feeling everyone's gazes on him, and looking at the pile of unconscious uchiha jonins on the ground, the first uchiha was angered. And this anger of his further boiled when he recalled the embarrassing experience of being knocked out with just a single kick. Focusing his attention on Kuroto, the first uchiha shouted, "Hyuga Kuroto, I will kill you with my own hands!" As he said so, his chakra flared and he pounced on Kuroto in a sonic boom, boom. So strong! Listening to the sonic boom in the air generated by the first uchiha, the weaker members of the Hyuga clan quickly covered their ears, retreated backward, and closed their eyes. At the same time, they all sighed deeply. Because this scene reminded them of the fact that the ones who were fighting Kuroto were all Jonin-level shinobi of the Uchiha clan, which means that each of them is extremely strong, reaching the peak 1% of Konoha and the shinobi world. Those who could still react worriedly looked at Kuroto, who was still standing in the center of the crowd. From the fact that Kuroto was standing still, they were not sure if Kuroto would be able to react. Although they have confidence in Kuroto, they were worried nonetheless because the first Uchiha seems to be coming towards Kuroto with killing intent. And yet, Kuroto has not given any reaction up until now. In the mix of sonic boom and shockwave, the first Uchiha rushed in front of Kuroto. Huge pressure swept over, prompting the timid ones to shut their eyes in panic, afraid of witnessing Kuroto's death. However, what everyone expected did not happen. There was no earth-shattering collision, and even the sonic boom and the shock waves brought by the first Uchiha came to an abrupt end. Confused, everyone opened their eyes nervously. And when they did, all they saw was Kuroto holding the first Uchiha by the neck without any change in his expression, and muttered with a sigh, "Huh, he was quite fast, but that's it." Then, without further ado, he knocked out the first Uchiha and threw him on the pile of unconscious Uchihas. That takes care of all of them. Although all of them are taken care of, I can't just leave them piled up here in an unconscious state. Really, if they wanted to cause me so much trouble, why not choose the Uchiha district? If it was there, I could just leave them as it is. But unfortunately, I can't do the same here. Sigh. What a headache, muttered Kuroto, with a helpless expression as he looked at the pile of unconscious Uchiha Jonin. While Kuroto was feeling troubled, at this moment, a Hyuga clansman who was standing guard at the entrance of the Hyuga clan district hurriedly crossed the long street and worriedly reported to the Hyuga Patriarch, "Patriarch, Uchiha Shisui is here." "What? He is here?" Hisashi was taken aback. His expression turned gloomy and brows tightened. The situation he was most worried about has started to unfold, and if Uchiha Shisui isn't handled properly, the situation can turn extremely bad for the entire Hyuga clan. After all, in the history of the shinobi world, as we know, the disputes between shinobi clans are often the results of personal conflicts between clansmen of the two clans. If once such a conflict happens, and it is not handled properly, it can become a fuse of war. And once personal conflict becomes the fuse of war, then what personal conflicts were the cause of the war becomes irrelevant. Because at that point, no matter what the issue was and how you try to solve that issue, the war will continue to escalate and inevitably involve other aspects, such as reputation, honor, dignity, life-death, love-hatred, and benefits. Such wars were extremely common in the Warring States period, when the shinobi clans often fought over such small personal conflicts and caused devastating wars that resulted in hundreds of deaths. In fact, many shinobi clans even perished because of these small reasons. Because Hayashi is extremely clear on this point, he is extremely worried. If Uchiha Shisui chooses to take revenge and tries to regain the honor of the Uchiha clan, then this small conflict that happened today might even become a cause of a war between the Uchiha clan and the Hyuga clan. As Hayashi worriedly looked in Kuroto's direction, 4 figures, each with the Uchiha fan symbol on their turtled collar shirt, walked into the Hyuga clan district. These 4 are undoubtedly Itachi, Shisui, Sasuke, and Kiyomi, who rushed over to stop the Uchiha clansmen from causing a mess. As the 4 Uchiha clansmen walked into the Hyuga clan territory, the curious Hyuga clansmen looked at them and started to whisper, "So that is Uchiha Shisui of the Uchiha clan, huh?" "Yes, I was in the same graduation year as him. He is indeed Shisui of the body flicker. The ones accompanying Uchiha Shisui are the children of the Uchiha patriarch, right?" "Yes, the eldest son Uchiha Itachi, then the younger son Uchiha Sasuke, and finally, the adopted daughter Uchiha Kiyomi. I have heard that all 3 of them are genius among geniuses. Uchiha Shisui and the heir of the Uchiha clan are here, and Kuroto-sama just beat so many jonins of the Uchiha clan, although they were the ones who offended Kuroto-sama and disrespected him. However, will Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itachi accept it? Isn't he coming here not a piece of good news for Kuroto-sama and the rest of us?" Now that you mention it, after understanding the identity of the 4 of them, and what their arrival here means, many Hyuga clansmen began to worry. Almost everyone in Konoha knows that Uchiha Shisui, the user of Mangekyu Sharingan, is the strongest shinobi in Konoha. He is strong enough to intervene in the battle between the leaders of Amatsukami and the Akatsuki organization, and still manage to come out alive, so his strength is unquestionable. If such a strong shinobi were to see his fellow clansmen lying beaten and bruised with swollen noses and bloody faces, one can only imagine what would be his reaction. Nobody would find it strange if Uchiha Shisui felt enraged and became an enemy of the Hyuga clan after witnessing such a scene. And if does become an enemy of the Hyuga clan, then the future of the Hyuga clan would be bleak, and there are even chances that the entire Hyuga clan might disappear overnight. Such thoughts were running in the minds of all the Hyuga clansmen as they looked at Shisui nervously. In fact, even Yui, who knew Shisui quite well, also looked at him with a nervous expression. Kuroto-kun and Shisui-kun are friends and colleagues, so Shisui-kun might overlook it this time. She thought in an attempt to convince herself, however, even she knew that this is just her wishful thinking, as the chances of such a thing happening are very low after all, for noble shinobi clan's pride, honor, and blood of the clan are above everything else. So, even if Kuroto and Shisui are friends when it comes down to the honor of their respective clans, whether Shisui will be willing to overlook this incident or not is really hard to say. Hisashi knew this fact too, so this time, he didn't hesitate at all, and immediately arrived next to Kuroto. Hisashi was ready to fight to the death against Uchiha Shisui if the situation turns to the south. The reason behind his actions is also very simple. He didn't want Kuroto to die here. The presence of Kuroto has made Hisashi believe that the future of the Hyuga clan will be different from what everyone had thought. This is just his instinctive feelings, but he chose to trust these feelings, and as such, he wanted to do what he can to make sure that Kuroto survives at all cost. Perhaps the same thought ran in the minds of many middle-aged members of the Hyuga clan. Therefore, consciously or unconsciously, they took steps forward in order to protect the future of the Hyuga clan. Whether to protect their respective families or the future of the Hyuga clan, they did take steps forward to protect the things precious to them with their lives. Everyone knows that Uchiha Shisui is the most genius shinobi of the Uchiha clan. Apart from having unmatched speed because of his unique body flicker jutsu that he uses in conjunction with the shadow clone jutsu, he also has the Mangekyu Sharingan and something that's called the Senin mode. Fighting against such a shinobi is not a joke. The Hyuga clansmen were aware of this, and as such they were slowly forming a siege around him, because that's the only method they might be able to do some damage to him and might have a chance of winning against him. As a siege circle started to take form around the 4 uchiha, The tension in the air started to rise. The weak and timid found it difficult to breathe and felt palpitating feelings. Even Neji was able to sense this tension and looked at everyone with a worried expression. His attention then turned towards Sasuke, but unfortunately Sasuke wasn't looking at him. At this moment, Sasuke's entire attention was focused on the pile of unconscious uchiha jonins lying not too far away from Kuroto. Noting everyone's reaction and their will to fight to death should the situation turn south, Hiyashi couldn't help but sigh. He groaned slightly and then walked forward in an attempt to resolve the situation peacefully. At the same time, he was thinking to himself anxiously, "I hope that Sandaime-sama arrives before it is too late. Otherwise, the consequences would be disastrous, and only he can stop this conflict from escalating." As the patriarch of the Hyuga clan, Hisashi is more than clear about the current situation of the Hyuga clan. The current prestige of the Hyuga clan is all but name and exaggeration, and the current Hyuga clan is only standing on the reputation of the past. No one in the Hyuga clan has the power to handle Uchiha Shisui. Even a group siege wouldn't be very useful against someone who can create a 100-meter-long giant using his chakra. So, if the Hyuga clan tried to stop Uchiha Shisui, then the weakness of the Hyuga clan will be proven, and it will be completely exposed to the entire world. Hisashi can't afford this situation. He can't allow the reputation of the Hyuga clan to fall, and this is precisely the reason why he sent one of the Hyuga clansmen and informed Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen so that the Hokage faction can intervene. From the very beginning, the entire conflict is related to the position of the principal of the Ninja Academy, so the intervention of the Hokage faction is completely reasonable and acceptable. The only worry Hisashi had at this time was that the arrival of Sandaime Hokage might get too late, and that would be very troublesome. Of course, if he knew the exact thoughts currently going on in the minds of Shisui and Itachi, he wouldn't be so anxious. Similar to how the entire Hyuga clan is nervous and worried, both Itachi and Shisui are also extremely anxious, and when they noticed themselves being surrounded in a siege by the Hyuga clansmen, they started to feel more and more panic. They are worried that the foolish actions of a few Uchiha clansmen have angered Kuroto and the entire Hyuga clan, which is not a piece of good news for the Uchiha clan, and now the entire Uchiha clan might have to suffer from Kuroto's wrath. Inwardly, they were cursing those stupid clansmen for risking the survival of the entire Uchiha clan. Seeing Itachi and Shisui's faces, even Kiyomi started to feel a little tense and subconsciously got closer to Itachi and Sasuke. Only Sasuke was different from everyone. His eyes were still focused on the pile of the unconscious Uchiha Jonins. For a moment, he couldn't believe his eyes when he saw those people lying unconscious and muttered to himself, "How did they get beaten so badly, and that too in such a short time?" Sasuke clearly remembers that those 8 people are the exact same clansmen who were clamoring to teach a lesson to Neji's sensei. But it hasn't been very long since they rushed out of the Uchiha clan, and they have already been beaten? And that too so badly? This is simply unbelievable. With a puzzled expression, Sasuke turned his gaze and looked at Neji's sensei standing not too far away. And what's notable is that at this time, Kuroto is surrounded by several top-tier Hyuga clansmen. Sasuke noticed that, unlike the unconscious Uchiha clansmen, Kuroto had no injury on his body. In fact, his clothes were also perfectly fine, and there were no dust or tear marks on his clothes. It seemed as if Kuroto hadn't fought anyone just a while ago. Could it be? Understanding something, Sasuke looked at Kuroto with a vigilant expression, and while glancing at all the Hyuga clansmen surrounding them, he nodded to himself with a sure expression. Humph. The people of Neji's clan must have used their higher number advantage to defeat our people so quickly. Hyuga clansmen are not honorable. They must be ashamed of themselves. If only he knew. But it's a pity he didn't know. After a while, Shisui and the other 3 walked in front of Kuroto. As they did, The attention of the entire Hyuga clan was focused on Shisui and Itachi. The entire clan was prepared. If Shisui and Itachi tried anything funny, they wouldn't hesitate to make their move. Shisui and Itachi swept their gazes over the crowd, and as they did so, the time seemed to have frozen. Worry, vigilance, fear, as well as several other emotions, were visible on the faces of everyone. No one knew what actions Shisui and Itachi would take, but almost each and everyone understood that a fight is inevitable. Both Shisui and Itachi looked at each from a side glance and nodded tacitly, and then immediately took action. But their actions were something that no one had expected. It was as if time was again frozen. In that short but long duration of time, both Shisui and Itachi sat on the ground in Dogeza position, and while prostrating themselves before Kuroto, they apologized. "Kuroto-san, some foolish members of our clan behaved rudely towards you and the entire Hyuga clan. Please accept our apology in their stead, and please forgive them." Huh? Everyone had thought of all sorts of bizarre scenes, but no one imagined such a bizarre scene that happened before them. And when faced with such a situation, everyone was taken aback. All the Hyuga clansmen, including Hiyashi and Hizashi, were shocked as the development of the situation has completely exceeded and changed from what they had imagined. Only Kuroto had a bland expression and said, "It's fine, but make sure to go back and inform your entire clan that if they want to challenge me, then they must make an appointment with me in advance. They can't just force themselves into the clan district and disturb everyone. This is not a good thing, and it also affects my reputation." "Yes, we understand. Such a thing wouldn't happen again." Both Shisui and Itachi nodded together and assured Kuroto. Kuroto nodded slightly. "I hope not." "Please rest assured." Shisui and Itachi reassured Kuroto. Seeing such a scene before them, everyone on the scene was taken aback. Even Neji, Sasuke, and Kiyomi were shocked and looked at each other with dumbfounded expressions.